the beginning when you wanted to be a musician, or what made you desire to either want to pick up a guitar? Did you pick up any other instruments before guitar, or how did it all start for you as a musician?
I mean, music was always around in my house as far back as I can remember. My dad was a singer in Mexico back in the 60s, but I didn't really know that as a little kid. I just always had, had heard music around the house and stuff like that. But the turning point for me was when I was 6 years old. One of my older cousins brought over Kiss Alive, and this is like
Nice.
75, late 75 or so. And I heard that album, and literally from that moment on, man, it just, my life changed. It just, my world turned upside down, and I was just completely enthralled in this record. And at 6 years old back then, I mean, Kiss was such a visual band. I was just sitting there staring at this double live album, and I'm looking at these guys that, they look like superheroes, they look like monsters, they look like, all kinds of crazy stuff. And so I flipped out over it, man. And that was the turning point for me. I remember telling my cousin from that moment on, I was like, this is what I want to do. And every time there was a guitar solo, I was like, who's that? He's like, oh, that's Ace. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to do. And it was like blinders for me from that point on, man. I didn't get a guitar until I was about 9, almost 10 years old. But I was just completely focused on wanting to do this. And, you always hope and dream as a kid that you take it as far as you could. I never imagined that I would get as far as I did. But that's how it started for me, man. It was just having music at home, and I always felt something very special whenever I listened to music or heard music, even as a little kid, and I didn't know, what it was. But after hearing that Kiss Alive album, it just solidified that, and I was like, yeah, this is it. This is what I'm here to do. So.
No, I mean, I totally agree, because I mean, I was in the same boat. So I was born in 1986. So around the time I was around, like, between 10 and 13, it was around like the Manson era. And,
Sure.
and it was kind of that whole thing too. I think it was Circus Magazine, or maybe it was Metal Edge Magazine, one of like the old rock magazines from back in the
Yeah.
day. And I remember flipping it open, and it had like Manson on one side, and I think it was Slipknot on the other. And it just, what was exciting to me about it, that kind of what you were talking about with the attraction of it all, was it looked like a playground on stage. Like, I knew this was a band playing music, but it also just looked like, you were going to like this circus or this carnival. So there was
Sure.
a very big intrigue for me for bands, especially theatrical bands. And I remember,
Yeah.
I think some of the first CDs that I ever had, because my uncle, he had, when we'd always go over and hang out at his house, he'd be in his garage working on his car, and he's playing like the Garage Inc. Metallica album or something. So there was rock music on one side of my family, and then it was like Christian, contemporary on the other side. So I'd always want to go
Gotcha.
over and hang out with my uncle.
Right. Of course.
And then I went to this like small, it was like a yard sale that this town had, and I came across Tool's album Opiate and Skinny Puppy's album Chainsaw. And kind of like when you were saying about, music that you never heard before, like people kind of looking like, monsters or
Yeah.
superheroes. And, I grew up on like Batman and Ninja Turtles and stuff like that. And that was kind of like, with Kiss, that was like that presentation that they gave.
Definitely. Yeah. It was, there's something, I don't know, that just really grabbed me. And maybe it was just, the time that I grew up in. I mean, as a little kid in the 70s, being hit over the head with that visual side of that music was, I think, what really just grabbed me, man, and it did not let go. And to this day, I mean, I'm still drawn to a lot of bands with a cool image and a cool look, and that went into some of the bands that I joined, like Society One. I mean, we definitely had like we had a look, we had an image, and we tried to we weren't just guys up there and in flannels and jeans.
Right.
We tried to bring somewhat of a show to the band. So I still dig all that stuff, man.
Yeah, and honestly, the first time that I'd seen and ever heard of you, now this is going back years ago, and it's funny that you mentioned that. So I was able to interview Matt from Society One about 2 or 3 weeks ago, actually. But it was
Nice.
funny. I was telling him the same thing. Like the first time that I ever seen Society One outside of the magazine part, because that kind of came around the same time. But
Hmm.
I'm a big horror movie buff, right? And I just remember the Omen 6 remake, and I
Mm.
remember going on to the special features, and then it just bleeds into this band Society One, and I'm like, wait, who are these guys and
Yeah.
everything? And I was just like, oh wow, wait, this is cool, and like I'm seeing like Matt being suspended from hooks, and then I started seeing
Yeah.
you guys pop up on like that TV show Uranium back in the day
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
stuff, and I
Totally,
was
man.
just yeah, so it was really cool, just kind of seeing even your career from even back then, and how it's had this 45-degree angle through all the bands that you've either been a part of or you've kind
Yeah.
of done the hired gun thing for.
Sure. No, definitely. It's like I said before, I've been very lucky to have the career that I've had. And I always try to bring some type of visual aspect to whatever it is that I'm doing, live, whether it was with Society One, with Lords of Acid, with any of the projects. I mean, you can see that I was usually, I tried to be either very animated with what I was doing, and depending on which project and which band, I mean, you kind of have to fit into that sort of mold. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I did my best to sort of walk that plank as far as I could with whatever band that I was with. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just because to me it was exciting, and I always remembered seeing bands like that as a kid, and being drawn to musicians that sort of push that envelope a little and give you a little bit more, rather than just kind of standing there and strumming, which, nothing wrong with that. If that's your thing, that's great. But for me, I always tried to like push it a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely, I would have been all about that as well, and if people want to do the jeans and t-shirt things, and that's their way of
Sure.
presentation,
Yeah.
by all means,
Yeah.
but
That's
I
what I'm
totally
that's what
agree.
I'm doing right now.
Well, and it's funny too, because I've seen like reverse aspects of that, and then kind of the dichotomy too. There was we were we when I was it was last year. I was with Cultus Black, and we played the Metal in the Mountains festival, and I remember we were talking with the singer from A Killer's Confession, and it was funny because he mentioned, because he was talking with me and the singer, and he was like, that's one thing I was glad to be out of, is having to do like the makeup and costume thing when I was doing the Mushroom Head gig. And then it was like maybe a month later, his next video is showing him, and he always got face paint going and stuff like that. And so he's doing the theatricality part again. So that was cool and stuff. But it was kind of funny because the show that we seen him on, he was like, he's got a t-shirt on and his jeans, and he's killing it and everything
Sure. Yeah.
and stuff. But yeah, I've always liked and always wanted to be like in a band. That I was really picky growing up. With all bands that I played with throughout the years, they'd have to have some type of theatrical element or something I really could get into, or I just
Sure.
really couldn't do it. I think performing wise, I was told this when I was in Motograder. They always told me that when I first joined, they were like, when the paint goes on, you're a completely different person. And so, could you say that was kind of like an asset to that as well when it comes to doing the
Sure.
theatricality of like going into like how an actor takes on a role and kind of going into this, free roaming part of yourself that maybe you can't display
Absolutely.
live on a day-to-day basis?
I absolutely can. I mean, it's definitely like a very Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing. I
Yeah.
think that for me, and going a little deep here, like I'm very shy, believe it or not, and still have signs of insecurity, from being a kid and blah 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 and all that stuff. But the second, I was on stage, and more so if I was Sin, the guy
Mm.
in blah 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 band or whatever, it was almost like that other person didn't exist anymore. And now all of a sudden I was 1,000% confident. I was 1,000% secure. It's like I didn't care what anyone thought about me or anything like that. And it was almost like this shield or this thing that I was I don't know, almost in a way sort of hiding behind, but this other part of me, just sort of came out. And you know, so I can definitely see that, because the onstage persona is one
Mhm.
thing, and off stage, I mean, you know, if people knew, like, you know, what my real life is like, in my daily routines, I think I'm like the most boring person in the world, you know, and that's fine, you know. That's totally cool with me, as long as, you know, on stage I bring it, and I'm able
Mhm.
to you know, sort of bring out this other, maybe, you know, hidden side that's inside of me, that is maybe too shy, you know, to bring out during normal life, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Again, sometimes it's also too hard to find that balance because I deal with the same thing because on a day to day I'm just Jonathan Price, but I go and play in bands, and ever since I was 14, I've always been zero on stage,
Yep.
and that kind of came from I went to a private school, and my teacher found out I was in a secular band because I wasn't playing Christian music, so she's like, "You're amount to nothing. It'd be one big zero for the rest of your life." So that was like an internal
Nice.
motive. No, it was an internal motivator for me to be like, you know what,
Yeah.
I'm gonna prove it to you. And I think that's kind of what amplified, my stage presence, I guess, in a sense,
Yeah.
on stage as well, to where it's like, you can let that, and it was almost like therapy, right? So it's like you
Yeah.
can let those feelings and emotions that maybe you bottle up or you hold out, you do it
Absolutely.
in a productive way.
Absolutely, man. And I feel that. I mean, it's very cathartic. It's like after a gig, I mean, you know, I'm sure you experience this as well. It's like I just feel completely drained, not only physically, but just
Yes.
emotionally, mentally, everything. Because I think, I mean, you're really giving 1,000%, and you're leaving everything out on that stage. And it's like emotions that maybe you kind of tucked away and you can't really bring out in your normal life. Everything comes out on stage, you know,
Hmm.
every emotion, everything is left there. So it's a very draining feeling, but a very good feeling, you know, after being on
Yeah.
stage. And I think that's all part of the high for
Yeah.
me, of doing it, you know. I've been clean and sober my whole life, and not to, you know, stand on a soapbox here and preach to anyone, but when I'm on stage, it's that's me chasing that high. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's for me, that's what it is. So that's the live part of it. I miss that stuff. You know, having not toured since I think the last tour I did was the Slayer tour we did in 2019, and I haven't toured since then. I left the band. I left Ministry in 2021, I believe, like a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. And
Hmm.
I've been doing a lot of studio stuff, obviously, with, you know, the projects that I have, and everything like that. But like that's the thing about live, is I miss that high, that
Yeah.
feeling of, you know, just leaving everything there. But I still get that from recording and from, you know, writing, and it's all part of the whole process. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, because I mean, especially with the writing of the music and then composing and everything, you're still putting out those emotions and those feelings and
Absolutely.
everything, and that's one thing. I agree with you on the live aspect too. As I remember, there was the year that my grandma passed away. I was on tour in Motigrator, and I got the call right before we went on stage at the
Oh
Oriental
man.
Theater in
Oh,
Colorado. And I
Jesus.
think if we wouldn't have went on stage, if we would have had like an off day or a drive day, I think I would have been way more of a wreck then, and I
Sure.
would have been
Yeah.
able to like go on stage because I know like that specific stage alone, out of that entire tour, I let out everything.
Everything. Sure.
And yeah, and I mean, like I was like punching my drum rig. I think I bled on the stage. I think
Yeah. No, I
but
believe it, man.
it's very therapeutic and very very cathartic. I definitely 100% agree with you on that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And with your upcoming projects that you got going on, you got Siglos that I've just been seeing coming out. Can you tell us what brought that about?
Yeah, so the material, so let me back up here. So during the after the 2019 Slayer tour that we did, you know, when I was in ministry,
Mhm.
the following year, 2020, we were actually rehearsing to we were getting ready to go to Australia and Japan, and this was
Oh wow.
March of 2020. And this is when, you know, the whole COVID thing was already, like, it was
Yeah.
starting. It was at the very beginning stages, and we really didn't know what was going to go on with it. But we were still rehearsing, you know, to go out there. And I remember we were going to be doing the download festivals, I believe, down in Australia and Japan, and we were rehearsing right next door to My Chemical Romance, and
Oh wow.
we were both going to be doing these same festivals together, right?
Hmm.
So I remember showing up to rehearsal, and one day all their techs were like loading out all their gear, and we were like, "Oh, what's up?" And they're like, "Oh, we're canceling, Australia and Japan because of this whole pandemic thing," and we were still had the green light to go. And so we
Hmm.
continued to rehearse for about another week or so until finally we got the call that it was going to be, they were going to pull the plug on it. So after that, we thought, okay, well, this will be over in a couple months, and then we'll be back on the road.
Right.
And and that obviously did not happen. So during that time, I went into hyper overdrive writing mode,
Hmm.
and I just started writing a bunch of stuff. And I was in the studio. I had a handful of material. I had written some stuff with another guy, and which that project is still sort of in the works on the sidelines right now.
Hmm.
But some of the other material, I was like, man, I'm hearing this kind of black metal vocal to it, which is new to me. I had never written anything that heavy, and so I was like I was in the studio with my producer Alex Crescioni, and I said, hey man, this is what I'm hearing for this song. And he suggested this guy named Pedro Sanchez, who he had worked with. So we had him come down to the studio. I played him this first song idea that I had. He dug it. He took it home. A couple of days later, he shows up, and it turned into a song called Por los Siglos, which was the first single that we released, the first video. And so I heard that, and I was like, man, this is awesome. This is exactly what I was hearing in my head. And at the time, I was going to do, for lack of a better term, like a solo album, and just
Hmm.
have different vocalists on, different tracks.
Yeah.
And after hearing this thing with Pedro, I dug it so much that I said, you know what, let's do another one. So I sent him another song that I did, and he killed that one as well. And then I said, all right, you know what, I'm really digging this. It got me really excited about having a project in that direction and in that style. And so we just decided to make a project out of it. And when he first came down to the studio, one of the very first things he asked me, which I hadn't even thought of, is he says, "Do you want me to sing in English or Spanish?" And automatically, I just said Spanish. And
Right.
I wasn't. It's almost like I didn't even think about it. I just said Spanish, and Spanish is his first language. It's my first language, and I just thought, wow, just another cool aspect. I thought, is to have this thing in Spanish, and so that's how that came about. And so all the lyrics are in Spanish, and that's how that project started, man. And we just kept writing and writing and writing, and finally got to an EP's worth of material, and that's what we just put out. And yeah, man. So that's how we got to where we're at right now.
Yeah, that's awesome, bro. And honestly, I mean, without further ado, I got the video pulled up here right now, so we'll go ahead and let the
Awesome.
fans and all the people that are reviewing this see this. So we have Siglos here with their music video for Por los Siglos. I swear, if there was ever music to get drugged to hell by, that is the song. Like
Man, we're scary, man. We are scary.
that is hauntingly badass. But
Thank you,
yeah,
man.
I would not
I,
want to wake up to that dude doing a vocal session at all. Period.
yeah, man, we're pretty heavy. Jesus.
I know. I was sitting there. I was like watching the video because like, even before when I was looking, I was just like, Jesus, like.
Yeah, man. Yeah, pretty intense. That's the first one, man, that we did, and yeah, I don't know. It's even for with the bands that I've been in, coming from a band like Ministry, that's even heavy to me. I'd never done anything with vocals
Yeah.
like that, and I don't know, man. Prior to that, I was almost a bit turned off by vocals, like that. But I think it's because I never really gave it a chance. I always just kind of dismissed it. And I remember several years ago doing a bunch of shows with like Behemoth out in Europe with Ministry and stuff like that. And finally, like watching them from the side of the stage, and I was just blown away. And I was like, oh shit, man! Like there's definitely musicality here, and there's something that I was just like being, I was just being, dumb and not giving it a chance and stuff like that. So once we got this thing going, I was just like, man, I'm in. Like, it's just another avenue, just another side of me that, that needed to be expressed and to come out. So, so I'm really happy with it.
Yeah, no, and dude, it came out great, and I think for
Thanks,
artists,
man.
exploring multiple avenues of what you're
Yeah,
capable of, I think is huge. I see a lot of
sure.
artists, even the popular ones, right? And they kind of stick around to this certain vein, or their label or management will be like, hey, you did really great on this record because it sounded like this, so let's do like the same thing, but like
Right.
let's call them different songs,
Exactly.
and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but you know all of the greatest bands, even when that, I mean, they've done experimentation, like even if it's flopped, Kiss did a disco
Sure,
album
man.
and stuff, but
Yeah,
it's
man.
like every.
There's so much to a person, and so many sides and so many things that you want to express and that you want to come out. I mean, to me, it's like it's very liberating and very freeing to just be able to do whatever the hell I want.
Mhm.
If I want to do a black metal album, if I want to do a country song, if I want to do a blues, whatever. To me, there are no rules, and so I like sort of having different projects for different things. I have a power metal outfit. I have this outfit. Like I have, there's a bunch of different things, different projects and stuff. And it's great, man, to be able to have that freedom to express, all of those things, and not have anyone telling you, well, you can't really do that, or you shouldn't do this or
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, because I mean, when you say it's not worth the sacrifice, right? With
Correct.
you talk to independent artists and people that yeah, they might not have the same push or the same
Sure.
notoriety of like a Slipknot or a Metallica, but they have the creative freedom and the intellectual property over everything that they do. That it can become not
Absolutely.
only a beneficial therapeutically, mentally, but also financially in the long run by kind of having that open palette to do things like that and expand into different areas of ideas to the product that you put out as a brand.
Very much so, and I think at my age and where I'm at in my career, I'm like everything that I do now is just like icing on the cake, and I mean that
Yeah.
honestly. Years ago, it was like, I was in that hamster wheel, and I was just like, okay, full steam ahead on this. I have to do this, 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 and this, and it's a very liberating feeling when you get to that point where you're like, you know what, man, I'm cool with where I'm at. I'm cool with the amazing things I've been able to do. Now I just kind of want to sit back a little bit and just really enjoy everything and take everything in and really like pursue whatever it is that I want to do. My next project could be something, completely different, and that's okay. Like I'm cool with that. I'm finally at that place, and it takes a while to get to that spot.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I'm in the same boat with you on that. I've been a musician and I guess playing in bands since I was 14, touring since I was 19, and I'll be 37 this year. And, you kind of get to a point to where, a lot of people have it to where it's like, we're going to ride till the wheels fall off. And it's a good mentality to have when going into this business, just to keep on going, learn from your trials, learn from your
Sure.
failure, and just keep going. But at the same point in time, have you done anything else or had the time really that you can dedicate? Because I mean, I've
Right.
watched myself come from a small little town in Freedom, Indiana, to growing the career that I've had already, and I'm in a full agreement with what you were saying. I'm cool with where I'm at, and everything else is just kind of a bonus. And
Yeah.
I was able to start up this company, Main Stage Music Group, get some employees, and also give back and help out other artists. And
Sure.
speaking of businesses, I mean, you have your own business too, correct?
Absolutely, man. I opened up my shop back in 1991. So I was 20, what, 22, 23 when I opened it up.
Hmm.
And at the time, I was just a local LA musician. I mean, my dream was always to, do music.
Yeah.
Um, but I knew early on that, at least for me, I was like, man, I think it'd be smarter for me to try to have my own business, to fall back on or in between tours or whatever, because the goal was to make it in music, right? But
Yeah.
I knew that if things were going to go how I planned them, there were going to be periods where I was going to have to be gone for months at a time.
Mhm.
And I thought, well,